Joining us is Democratic Senator Chris Coons of Maryland. He serves on the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee, and that was where Attorney General Sessions was supposed to be testifying tomorrow. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning, Allison.
So what is the issue here? That there's a debate between where Sessions should be testifying, Judiciary, Senate Intel, or your Appropriations Committee?
Well, the Attorney General comes in front of both the Senate Judiciary Committee and the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee that's responsible for judiciary every single year. That's part of our regular oversight responsibilities. And I think the Attorney General should make his appearance this year and shouldn't dodge this opportunity.
Sorry to interrupt, but is there a question as to whether or not he'll appear before your subcommittee?
Yes, he has declined for months to appear in front of the Judiciary Committee. And as of this weekend, he's now seeking to testify in front of Intel. As you suggested in the opening, that may well be because he's trying to have his testimony be shielded from the American people. And I don't think that's appropriate, Alice. And I don't think that on an issue as important as whether or not the Attorney General is acting outside the scope of his recusal, whether he misled our committee, the Judiciary Committee, about a third meeting with the Russian ambassador, that shouldn't be held in secret. Allison, the other thing that shouldn't be going on in secret is the process by which the Republicans are crafting a repeal of Obamacare. There have been no hearings. There's been no public discussion about it. And by some news reports over the weekend, we may be days or even weeks away from the Republicans moving directly to the floor, a significant bill that would affect tens of millions, even hundreds of millions of Americans, give big tax cuts, cut back on health care, defund Planned Parenthood without a single public hearing. That's also wrong.
Okay, and I do want to get to that, particularly since that is something that concerns so many Americans and that some people think that all of this Russia cloud is eclipsing. But give me one more second on Jeff Sessions.
Sure.
Why not just follow the James Comey model? Why not just have Jeff Sessions go in front of Senate Intel in both an open and closed hearing? Is that the answer?
Well, that's a good first step. That is a good way for the same senators who ask questions of former FBI Director Comey to be able to ask follow-up questions of Attorney General Sessions. But I agree with Senator Feinstein. The Judiciary Committee has the oversight responsibility for the Department of Justice. It is the Judiciary Committee that has more former prosecutors and more lawyers on it, more folks familiar with what happens in the Justice Department than any other committee in the Senate.
Okay, very quickly, did you hear something from James Comey that, for you, rose to the level of obstruction of justice?
I think he has laid out the core elements of an obstruction of justice charge. It is a difficult case to make, and I think a lot more investigation would have to be done. But if you just took FBI Director Jim Comey's testimony on its face, he certainly spoke to intent and motivation and to substantive action by the president to try and impede an ongoing federal investigation when he directed FBI Director Comey to drop the investigation into former National Security Advisor Flynn.
Okay, on to health care. What do you mean your Republican colleagues are doing all of this in secret? I mean, there's no bipartisan effort to try to fix Obamacare.
None. Allison, all the Democrats in the Senate sent a letter to the Republican caucus saying, we recognize that there are flaws and challenges with the Affordable Care Act. Stop your efforts to repeal all of the Affordable Care Act on a partisan basis, and please work across the aisle with us. And we can find a way to move forward and to get a better health care system for all Americans. The response has been a whole series of closed-door meetings with virtually no outreach to Democrats by the Republican leadership.
So is it your understanding that your Republican colleagues will be presenting their version of the Obamacare replacement soon, in the next couple of weeks?
They are certainly trying. They have a shrinking window. They're going to use a vehicle to do this called reconciliation that allows them to do it by just 51 votes, 50 votes plus the vice president. And in order to do that, they're pursuing a path that would be Republican only. They're finding it very hard to get to 50 votes in the Republican caucus in the Senate because some of the far right wants to completely repeal the Affordable Care Act. The things that fund it and the consumer protection provisions and the ways that it's helped 24 million Americans get access to health care, and it's improved the quality of the health care that more than 150 million Americans have. But then there's folks who are more moderate Republicans who want to save or extend the Medicaid expansion that their states have benefited so much from. So they have big internal divisions. Mitch McConnell, the Republican majority leader, is pushing hard for them to get this done before the August recess. So we're hearing rumors that they are making real progress, but we have very little insight into exactly what the provisions are of this bill. When the Democrats passed the Affordable Care Act back in 2009, I wasn't in the Senate, but there were hearings after hearings after hearings over a year before that they were going to have to pass the bill without Republicans. The bill had Republican amendments taken up and voted on in committee hearings before it ultimately became law. That's a very different process than the closed-door process Republicans are following now.
Okay. We obviously will be watching both of these things very closely. Senator Chris Coons, thank you very much for being on.
Thank you, Allison.